On a subway train, Dr. Kim stares at a smartphone as a familiar line echoes in his mind. There are 3 ways to survive the apocalypse. Everything is starting to fade, but one thing is certain. If you're reading this, you will survive. He reaches the final page of the web novel, 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, final episode, and can only think, is that really the end? He introduces himself as Dakja, a name that can mean only child, reader, or individualist, a meaning people almost always misunderstand. Flashbacks of his life pass by as he thinks of himself at 28, a graduate of a third-rate college, now a contract worker at a large corporation subsidiary, whose only real hobby is reading serialized web novels on his commute home. His concentration breaks when Sang-yu from HR speaks to him, casually joking that he might disappear into his phone, and Dakja can't believe he's run into the most popular woman at work, someone who usually has men lining up to drive her home. As the ride continues, Sanga studies Spanish, casually explaining a phrase about borrowing money, and Dakja silently marvels at how different she is, studying even on the subway. When she asks what he's reading, he hurriedly hides his screen, The World After the Apocalypse, and awkwardly says he's studying Korean, only to feel further out of place when she mentions her favorite authors, Murakami Haruki and Raymond Carver. His thoughts return to TWSA, the story he's followed for 10 years, since middle school, through bullying, exams, and military service, and he notices the view count is exactly 1. Proof that he alone has read it all this time, a story written just for him. Back in conversation, Senga talks about their contracts ending soon, unaware that she's already been promoted, a natural heroine if life were a novel, while Dakja sees himself as nothing more than a reader. His phone vibrates with a message from the author, TLS 123, thanking him for being the reason the story could be finished and mentioning a contest win, followed by news that the epilogue will become paid content and that Dakja will receive a small gift. At 6:55 p.m., an email arrives titled "Thank you for everything," informing him that starting at 7 p.m., TWSA will become paid content and that this change will help him. Realizing he has only 5 minutes left, Dakja opens his favorites list, only to be met with a message saying no results were found, leaving him staring at his screen as he mutters, that's strange. The pain is suddenly swallowed by darkness, tension tightening the air as Dakja Kim stares in disbelief at a floating creature that looks exactly like a dakibi from the novel he just finished. 2 small horns, a downy body wrapped in straw, too strange to be a fairy, too malicious to be an angel, and far too innocent-looking to be a devil. Passengers mutter nervously, wondering if this is some kind of augmented reality, but Dakja knows better because no one understands what's happening except him. This dakibi appears exactly as described in the opening of 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse. Hovering in the center of the carriage, the creature speaks in a garbled language before cheerfully fixing its settings and asking if everyone can hear, laughing as office workers and wannabe actors shout complaints and demands. Amused, the dakibi remarks that it was told putting up the paywall around 7 p.m. would bring the most customers, and in that moment Dakja becomes certain he knows how this story unfolds, urgently warning Sanga not to move. The creature's eyes suddenly glow red as its patience snaps, and with a deafening command for silence, a passenger's head explodes in a sickening splatter of blood, proving this is no movie, dream, or novel, but a twisted reality none of them recognize. Dakja's doubt finally vanishes as blood spreads across the floor, and when Mr. Han from the finance team desperately offers money in exchange for freedom, the dakibi only smirks, explaining that money has meaning only within human space-time before burning it and threatening his life. Then a digital screen flickers into existence. Channel hashtag BI 7623 has opened, as the dakibi announces the arrival of the constellations and warns that their debt is already growing, encouraging them to earn their keep themselves. A notification rings out for everyone, revealing main scenario number 1. Prove your value, a low difficulty mission with a simple condition. Kill 1 or more living organisms within 30 minutes for a reward of 300 coins, with death as the penalty for failure. Laughing lightly, the dakibi wishes them luck, eager to witness what kind of story they will create. The subway car, as Sang-yu desperately checks her phone, shouting that the police won't answer, only for Dr. Kim to tell her to stay calm and remind her of the Apocalypse game her development team has been working on, the one where only a handful survive, insisting that they're inside that game now and that every game has rules they need to understand. As he takes in the scene, a Dakibi with antennae, bodies strewn across the cabin, office workers drenched in blood, Dakja realizes that 3 ways to survive the apocalypse, the story he's read for 10 years, is unfolding right in front of him. A tall, muscular man steps forward and commands everyone to calm down, identifying himself as Army Lieutenant Hyun-seong Lee from Unit 6502 and claiming authority after receiving a Level 1 national emergency alert, while Dakja silently recognizes him as Steelblade, Hyun-seong Lee, a major supporting character who shouldn't have appeared until later, realizing something is already wrong. The passengers then crowd around a phone broadcasting the Prime Minister, who begins a speech about terrorist attacks and government response, only for his head to suddenly explode on screen, as the Dakibi floats above them and mocks their disbelief, declaring that if they want a game, the difficulty will increase. With a snap of its fingers, the main scenario timer rapidly drops, a system message announcing they now have only 10 minutes left, followed by a cruel penalty. If no one dies within 5 minutes, every living organism in the cabin will be killed. To push them over the edge, the Dakibi displays a live feed of Taepung Girls High School, where a classroom timer hits 0 and students' heads begin exploding one after another in fountains of blood, ending with a system message naming Jae-hai Lee, a second-year student, as the sole survivor of it, desperately tries to pull up 3 ways to survive the apocalypse on his phone, thinking that if he can read it again, he'll know exactly what to do, only to be met with a cold message saying no results were found, making him realize the novel has been removed despite never being popular. Remembering the author's words about paid content, he finds an old email containing a file titled 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse, TXT, and wonders if the author sent him the entire story as a final gift. As digital notifications flash before his eyes announcing that every survivor has received a special attribute and linked skill, Dakja treats it like a game, trying and failing to open his attributes window before opening the text file instead, triggering a new message that his attribute has activated and he can now read at an accelerated speed. He tears through the opening chapter in seconds and freezes as a horrifying realization hits him. The protagonist of the prologue was in cabin 3707, but he's in cabin 3807, prompting him to check the novel's description of his own cabin, which coldly states that only 2 people will survive there. Instantly, Dakja knows who they are, Hyun-seong Lee and Namwon Kim, meaning everyone else in the cabin, including himself and Sanga, is fated to die. As chaos erupts, Namwon Kim violently attacks an elderly woman, shouting that the army won't save them and that someone has to die, and soon other passengers join in, driven by the terror of the ticking clock. Watching it unfold, Dakja feels like he's reading the novel itself, knowing that Namwon Kim is the one who shatters society's fragile morality and that the nameless old woman is destined to become the first victim. When Sanga tries to rush forward to stop them, Dakja grabs her and tells her to stay put, warning that she'll be killed if she interferes, and when she protests, he makes her a promise that if she listens to him just this once, he'll never bother anybody out of fear or indifference, but because he's been waiting for the exact right moment. And as the timer drops to 7 minutes and 32 seconds, Dakja finally continues and violence erupts inside the subway cabin. Dakja Kim lunges through smoke and chaos, intercepting Namwon Kim as he assaults an elderly woman, drawing a furious curse in response. Though Dakja knows it may look like he acted to save her when in truth he was aiming for something more. Ignoring Namwon's rage, he desperately searches the floor, finds a small object, and presses it into the trembling woman's hand, telling her to hold on tight before turning to face the bloodthirsty crowd. He shouts for everyone to stop, warning them that killing the old woman won't guarantee survival, forcing the passengers to hesitate as he calmly lays out the logic. If one death buys time, what happens next, and who will they kill after that? The person standing beside them? When someone snarls that they'll kill him next, Dakja doesn't flinch, instead asking why they should gamble their lives when there's a way to clear the scenario without becoming murderers. As Namwin scoffs and demands how, Doctor reveals the loophole. The scenario never said they had to kill a human, only a living organism, and holds up a bug collection box, explaining that insects are enough to meet the condition. The realization spreads through the cabin, but before anyone can act, Namwin snatches the box, crushes the insects without hesitation, and tosses it aside with a laugh as the system announces the first kill has been completed. Dakja is startled by his own reaction, wondering why he's smiling and why his heart is pounding with excitement. When a digital window suddenly opens, revealing Namwon Kim's character profile, an edgelord with dangerous adaptability and a fully awakened dark side, someone best avoided. Instead, Namwon turns to Dakja with unsettling interest, accusing him of wanting to watch everyone struggle for survival, as a system message announces Namwon's interest in him, followed by a blunt offer to team up. Dakja glances at the timer. 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Subway cabin. Dakja Kim calmly rejects Namwon Kim's offer of an alliance, saying he works alone, knowing that while teaming up would guarantee short-term survival, his knowledge as a reader and seeing Namwon in person makes it clear how dangerous he truly is. When Namwon moves toward the elderly woman again, intent on finishing her off, Dakja blocks his path and grabs his arm, listening as Namwon sneers about unfinished business and mocks him for suddenly playing the hero. As the digital timer ticks down past 1 minute and panic consumes the cabin, passengers scramble desperately to find anything alive to kill, shouting as they chase unseen targets, while Dakja locks eyes with Namwon and calmly asks what if there's a way to clear the scenario without killing a human, or even an insect. Before Namwon can fully react, Dakja makes his move, and with a sickening squelch, system notifications flood his vision, announcing that he has killed living organisms and earned bonus coins again and again, quietly exploiting what others failed to notice. When the timer finally hits 0 and a wave of completion washes through the cabin, the system offers a tutorial on coin usage, which Dakja immediately skips as he dives straight into preparation, investing 2,700 coins into his stamina and watching it jump from level 1 to level 10 in an instant. As his strength and body settles and the notifications fade, Dakja realizes the truth with chilling clarity. The first scenario is over, and now the real nightmare begins. Stench of blood hangs thick inside subway cabin 3807 as the Dakibi floats back in, surveying the carnage with open fascination and commenting on the mess left behind during its brief absence. While the system announces that main scenario number 1, Prove Your Value, has ended, leaving only 5 survivors: Sangyu, Hyeon-seong Lee, Myongo Han, Gilleong Lee, and Dakja Kim. As Myongo Han grovels on the floor, begging to be saved and insisting that human lives still matter, Dakja coldly asks why he should care, stating that those rules belong to the old world and that this new world demands new ones. Wiping the blood from his face, Dakja looks over the bodies and admits to himself that he could have saved them, that the guilt is real. Yet what unsettles him most is how calm he feels, as though he's merely reading the novel instead of living inside it, a thought punctuated by system messages revealing he slaughtered 124 living organisms, 1 grasshopper and its eggs, earning the Decimator achievement and 3,500 coins after deductions. When the train starts moving again, some passengers cling to the hope that they're heading home, but Dakja gazes out the window to see a massive snake-like ichthyosaur coiling through the Han River, fully realizing that the world they once knew has collapsed and that he alone knows how this story ends. Watching the Dakibi gleefully check channel statistics, Dakja senses the presence of 21 constellations observing them, cosmic spectators orchestrating this tragedy as entertainment, and while 2 feel hostility toward him over Namwon Kim's death, others are clearly impressed, rewarding him with additional coins. As Sangha thanks him for the bug cage that saved her, Dakja brushes past the gratitude and instead approaches the young boy Gilleong Lee, offering to team up, just as the Dakibi announces that the survivors are now eligible for Constellation sponsorship, praising them for proving that even bugs deserve to live. Dakja knows what a sponsor truly means and understands that none of them are strong enough to survive the next scenario alone, and as the Dakibi urges them to experience it firsthand, A digital selection screen slowly materializes before them. Scenes rise before the survivors in subway cabin 3807, and while everyone else stares in confusion, Dr. Kim immediately understands the weight of the names listed on his sponsor selection screen. Powerful constellations offering their backing, far more than most incarnations ever receive, making him realize just how closely he's being watched. When Sangayu turns to him in panic, admitting she doesn't understand any of it, Dr. calmly tells her to think of it like an aptitude test, to choose what feels right or wait if she's unsure, knowing full well that constellations are nothing more than cosmic spectators of a cruel reality show, granting power in exchange for the pleasure of watching human struggle. As Dr. reviews his own options, he recognizes both overwhelming power and hidden danger, sponsors that would bind him as their possession, and decides he won't become anyone's puppet, choosing instead to reject them all, a decision that sends shock through the unseen audience, as no one has ever refused a sponsor during the first scenario. Before the tension can settle, the train screeches to a stop and a heavy thump echoes through the door to the next cabin, metal bending outward with each impact, prompting Hyen Seong Lee to ready himself and Dakja to urgently warn that they must leave immediately or die before the next scenario even begins. When Sangha hesitates, unsure if the person beyond the door is an enemy, Dakja answers coldly that the one approaching is the sole survivor of that cabin, the man who killed everyone else, and asks if she's still scramble inside the subway as panic sets in. Hyen Seong Lee struggling with a jammed door while Dr. Kim checks his remaining coins and decides he can't afford to waste them yet, instead shouting for Hyen Seong to use his skill, prompting confusion until Dakja activates his character profile and reveals the latent power within him. Trusting an instinct he can't explain, Hyen Seong unleashes Great Mountain Push with a thunderous roar, forcing the doors open and allowing everyone to spill out onto the tracks, only to realize they're standing high above the Han River on Dongo Bridge. A new scenario appears. Escape the bridge within 20 minutes, and Dakja immediately urges everyone to run, knowing there's no time to hesitate. Halfway across, the bridge begins to shudder violently as a massive shadow moves beneath the water, and a colossal ichthyosaur erupts from the river, smashing part of the bridge and sending Myongo Han into hysterics. Dakja realizes something is wrong, because the monster shouldn't be attacking yet, and with only 200 yards left, survival is still possible if they sprint. That hope vanishes when the Dakibi appears midair, bored and unimpressed, snapping his fingers to increase the difficulty and revive the evil thoughts of the dead, causing black ether to rise as corpses from the first scenario twitch and stand back up. As Sangha recoils in terror at the sight of the undead swarming the bridge and the ichthyosaur circles for another strike, Dakja understands the truth. The Dakibi is deliberately turning this into a slaughter for the constellation's amusement. He draws his weapon as zombies close in from all ends of Dongo Bridge leave Dakja Kim and the others clinging to survival as the structure collapses, with Hyen Seong Lee and the young boy Gilleong already reaching stable ground, while Sangyu and Myongo Han barely scramble back from the edge, forcing Dakja to realize that surviving the collapse only creates a far worse problem. A blinding flash suddenly fills the gap, and a system message announces that a constellation's blessing has activated a Deus Ex Machina, a bridge of even numbers that can only be crossed by an even number of people, an unmistakable prank straight out of the novel. Panic sets in as Myongo understands the rule first, realizing that with 3 people left, someone must be abandoned, and before Dakja or Sangha can react, he grabs Sangha and drags her onto the bridge, shouting an apology as the light holds for the two of them and carries them safely across. The bridge vanishes the moment they reach the other side, leaving Dakja alone on the broken ledge as a massive Grade 7 sea serpent rises from the dark water below, its presence crushing and inevitable. Exhausted and skill-less, Dakja barely dodges as the monster lunges, its jaws obliterating concrete where he stood, and in that instant of desperation, a new system window appears announcing the activation of a personal skill called Bookmark. 3 slots load before his eyes, listing Namwon Kim and Hyen Seong Lee. And though Dakja has read thousands of episodes without ever encountering this ability, he instinctively understands how it works. Fixing his gaze on the serpent, Dakja activates the first bookmark, borrowing Namwon Kim's existence for 1 minute, and his aura twists as manic laughter escapes his lips, his expression turning feral as he echoes Namwon's creed that the new world needs new rules. With borrowed madness and power surging through him, Dakja launches himself at the monster, ready to gamble everything on a single violent minute. While Dakja is dealing with the zombies, some noise came from behind, and Dakja instantly understood that MC has arrived, with the message 10 minutes 11 seconds as the Junhyuk 2, main character of TWSA, appears, sensing something unusual. The edge of the bridge is a terrifying place, with Dakja Kim dangling over the river, his throat gripped tightly by Junhyuk. The massive ichthyosaur lurks below, ready to strike at any moment. Despite the suffocating pressure, Dakja stares directly into Junhyuk's eyes, activating his personal skill, desperate to learn more about the man who holds his life in his hands. As the system flashes with a summary of Junhyuk's attributes, Dakja realizes just how outmatched he is. This man is a regressor, someone who has lived through the tragedy of this world multiple times. He's the one who will set everything in motion, and Dakja, a mere reader, stands no chance. Junhyuk demands to know how Dakja is still alive, tightening his grip, accusing him of being a prophet or another regressor after killing Namwon Kim. But Dakja insists he's just a reader, someone who knew what was going to happen, though the truth hangs heavily in the air. As Junhyuk's eyes glow with golden light, Dakja recognizes the danger. The Eye of the Sage is Junhyuk's SS grade skill, one that allows him to see everything about his opponent, including hidden information. Dakja fears the worst. If Junhyuk sees the text file of his life story, he will be finished instantly. But then, something unexpected happens. As Junhyuk's gaze pierces through him, Dakja's personal skill, the fourth wall, activates, blocking the most powerful detection skill in existence. Junhyuk recoils in pain, unable to understand why he can no longer see Dakja's information. Dakja, now with a glimmer of hope, tries to seize the opportunity. As Junhyuk recovers, shifting from curiosity to wariness, Dakja presses the advantage, telling him they're running out of time to reach Oxus Station. Junhyuk, however, squeezes his throat one last time, unwilling to let him go just yet. Everything is falling into place for Dakja. He may not know his own attributes yet, but one thing is clear. He is no longer just a reader. He is now a variable in Junhyuk-Yu's story. At the edge of the bridge, Junhyuk-Yu tightens his grip around Dakja Kim's throat as a system message flashes in Dakja's mind, announcing that the fourth wall has blocked the Eye of the Sage, leaving Junhyuk staring at him in shock and demanding to know what he is, while Dakja realizes he possesses skills he never even knew existed. Struggling to breathe, Dakja urgently tells Junhyuk to wait, insisting that he needs a reliable ally and warning that even a regressor like him can't clear Scenario 46 alone, which only deepens Junhyuk's suspicion as he questions whether Dakja is also a regressor. Dakja counters that his identity doesn't matter, only his usefulness, claiming he knows a future Junhyuk doesn't, prompting Junhyuk to activate lie detection, only for the system to confirm Dakja is telling the truth. As Junhyuk considers the possibility of another prophet, Dakja reflects on the rare attribute that allows one to see the future in nullified detection. And when Junhyuk asks if Dakja can truly see ahead, Dakja explains that regressors eventually reach an unknown future because their own actions change it, urging him to take Dakja on as a companion. With only 40 seconds left on the timer, Junhyuk drags Dakja toward the bridge of even numbers as Dakja's skills begin to fail from exhaustion, then suddenly stops and dangles him over the river again, demanding a final prophecy, whether he'll let go or not. Cursing Junhyuk's insanity, Dakja refuses to submit, insisting on being treated as an equal and demanding cooperation, before finally snapping and telling Junhyuk to let go and get lost. Junhyuk releases his grip, calmly declaring that he believes Dakja is truly a prophet as Dakja falls, and the system coldly announces that Dakja has failed to clear the scenario. Dakja Kim surfaces inside the ichthyosaur's stomach, choking on toxic fluid as he gasps for air, realizing with grim relief that he wasn't torn apart or digested immediately, even as he takes in the grotesque walls and half-dissolved remains around him, cursing Junhyakyu under his breath. Dakja understands this was never mercy, but a test. Junhyak wants him to prove his worth by surviving alone, just as he's forced others to do before. And Dakja gets it, because Junhyak has been alone since his first failed regression, too powerful to stand beside anyone, feared as a monster or worshipped as a savior, leaving him to see all humans as either tools or enemies. Steadying himself as the digestive fluids rise, Dakja calls out into the darkness, knowing the stream is still watching, and summons Baihyang by name, shocking the small horned Dakibi when he materializes in a crackle of static. Calmly, Dakja needles him about dwindling coin revenue, forcing Baihyang in a panic as system messages hint that the constellations are starting to notice something off about this human. Dakja lays it bare. The star stream is just a galactic broadcast. Constellations are subscribers, humans are actors, and Dakibi are nothing more than streamers packaging suffering into entertainment. Leaning closer, Dakja quietly proposes they talk off the record, and after a moment's hesitation, Baihyang cuts the feed, the live icon blinking out as silence falls. When Baihyang demands answers, Dakja ignores the question and instead offers temptation, asking if he doesn't want to become the Dakibi king, to surpass the massive channels and rule the starstream itself. As Baihyang freezes in disbelief, Dakja delivers his final line with absolute certainty. He'll make him the greatest streamer in existence. But first, they need to sign a contract. Inside the ichthyosaur's stomach, Baihyang bursts into hysterical laughter, calling Dakja insane and finally understanding why he rejected every constellation during sponsor selection, while Dakja calmly confirms that he never chose a sponsor at all. Though Baihyang insists he can't accept the offer because he's a Dakibi, not a constellation, Dakja clarifies that he isn't asking for sponsorship. He's proposing a stream contract instead. Stunned, Baihyang realizes Dakja wants to partner directly with a streamer, bypassing constellations entirely, and Dakja presses the point, arguing that constellations are fickle and short-tempered, but together they could create a story no one has ever seen, an incarnation surviving without a sponsor. Dakja explains that a stream contract allows the streamer and incarnation to share profits, something almost unheard of since most incarnations cling desperately to borrowed power. Then shocked Baihyang further by proposing a brutal ratio, 10-0, where Dakja keeps all scenario coins and Baihyang takes every donation. When Baihyang protests, Dakja counters with an even split, reminding him that powerful constellations like the Secret of Plotter and the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon are already watching. And as Baihyang checks the channel interface, the rising numbers silently confirm Dakja's potential. While Baihyang hesitates, Dakja opens the Dakibi shop, granted during negotiations, and quietly prepares to prove his worth, purchasing Hammer Seahorse's mucus and Stonehog's sharp thorns without explanation, ignoring Baihyang's skepticism. In the end, Baihyang snaps his fingers and closes the channel, declaring negotiations will continue only after Dakja clears the scenario. And as the live feed cuts off and the audience disappears, Dakja steels himself, knowing it's finally time to deal with the monster from the inside out. Trapped inside the dark, corrosive stomach of the ichthyosaur, Dakja Kim drifts in swirling gastric fluid, his battered body barely protected by a layer of translucent slime as exhaustion weighs down on him and a bitter thought crosses his mind, that he was never meant to be the main character, just an ordinary reader watching the story from afar. His hands tremble as he wonders if he ever truly had the right to survive this far, wishing it were all a dream. Yet the stench, the pain, and the relentless reality make escape from truth impossible. Leaning against the pulsing stomach wall, its heavy rhythm echoing like a heartbeat, Dakja forces himself to accept the madness of the situation, telling himself he'll be fine, because this monster has become his mother, a grotesque womb that shelters him, feeds him, and forces his evolution. 4 days pass in this living prison, marked by a glowing system timer, as Dakja carve high-grade monster flesh from the stomach walls using the Stonehog's sharp thorn. consuming it to grow stronger, while system notifications confirm his rising stamina, and even constellations begin to admire his sheer refusal to die. When the Dakibi Baihyang finally appears, hovering above the acidic depths, he stares in stunned disbelief, realizing Dakja has used hammer seahorse mucus to neutralize stomach acid and monster thorns to anchor himself, turning a sea commander into a grotesque survival shelter, driving channel engagement through the roof as constellations watch in awe. Rising to his feet at last, eyes sharpened with resolve, Dakja grips the thorn tightly and declares he stayed in this twisted wound long enough, beginning his climb toward the monster's throat, ready to force his own rebirth by killing the beast from the inside out. Dakja Kim emerges from the mangled remains of the ichthyosaur near Gumho Station, stepping into air choked with poisonous green gas while system warnings flare, forcing him to hurry as the effects of his protective gear begin to fade and he activates Elaine Monkey's lungs to keep breathing. Descending into the station's underground levels, he finds a crowded refuge split by tension and fear, survivors clustered into factions, with the weak pushed aside and bullied by those trying to seize power, just as always happens in apocalypse stories where kingdoms rise from ruin. His attention is drawn to a large, muscular man named Kyol Soo Kim, leader of the so-called Action Group, who aggressively confronts a young woman from the marginalized crowd, only to be interrupted when Dakja steps onto the platform, drawing stunned stares from people who can't believe someone survived the poison surface. Before the hostility can escalate, Sangha Yu and Hyen Seong Lee rush toward him, Sangha breaking down in tears as she realizes he's alive, and Hyen Seong greeting him with visible relief, explaining that they feared the worst after the bridge collapsed. Dakja quickly asks about Gilleong, learning the boy is nearby, but hasn't spoken since Dakja vanished. As the brief reunion ends, Kyol Soo approaches, clearly threatened by Dakja's presence and strange equipment, demanding to know who he is. Dakja answers coldly, introducing himself as Kim Dakja and declaring that he's the one who's going to change how things work in this station, just as unseen eyes take interest and Dakja senses it clearly. The Line of Liberty scenario has begun, and for now, Gumho Station is ruled by nothing but the law of the jungle. Dakja Kim stands once again inside the tense, crowded halls of Gumho Station as members of the Kyolda group rush around treating injuries and shouting for help, when suddenly familiar voices gasp his name in disbelief, drawing stunned eyes toward him. Sangha Yu and Hyen Seong Lee hurry to his side, relief washing over their faces as Sangha tearfully insists she's grateful he's alive, and Hyen Seong bows his head, apologizing for leaving him behind, only for Dakja to calmly tell him it couldn't be helped and that he's just glad things turn out this way. When Dakja asks about Yu Jung-hyuk, Hyen Seong explains that although Jung-hyuk believed Dakja would survive, he actually left the station the day before, and in that moment Dakja understands why the Kyolda group thugs, who should have been wiped out, are still breathing. Watching those same men move freely through the station, Dakja reflects on Jung-hyuk as a third-round regressor who has become a monster focused solely on his goal, someone who no longer looks back, even if he once bothered to take out the trash, earning quiet amusement from unseen eyes. Dakja then notes that one person is still missing, and as the crowd parts, the station manager Myongo Han pushes forward, freezing in terror the moment he locks eyes with Dakja, memories flashing of him calling Dakja a deceitful man who shouldn't exist. With a cold, polite smile, Dakja greets him warmly, remarking that such hostility isn't appropriate when all the survivors are supposed to be getting along, marking the beginning of a far more uncomfortable reckoning. Inside Gumho Station, Dakja Kim finds himself surrounded by survivors and members of the Kyolda group as Kyol Soo Kim and Inho Cheon smoothly apply pressure, insisting he can't survive there unless he cooperates and publicly framing it as a mutual agreement, a clear attempt to corner him and seize control of the food he brought from the outside. Inho declares they'll manage the food fairly and promises future cooperation, extending his hand as if Dakja has no real choice, only for Dakja to calmly agree, on one condition, that the food won't be free. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as the shocking idea of buying food in an apocalypse sinks in, and Dakja makes his stance clear. He isn't a charity, and anyone who wants the food must pay for it in coins, drawing keen interest from unseen spectators. Just as tensions peak, a sharp ringing echoes through the station and blue system windows appear, announcing a new penalty clause, the hidden trap of the second scenario, revealing that starting at midnight, every survivor must pay a daily cost of survival of 100 coins or die, a punishment that will remain until the second main scenario is cleared. Panic instantly replaces greed as people realize they're on a nightly countdown to execution, while Dakja silently observes, knowing most of them don't even have enough coins to last 3 days. To survive now, the world gives them only brutal options: kill monsters, clear sub-scenarios, or take coins from each other, as another system message urges movement toward active scenario zones. Watching the station descend into fear, Dakja thinks coldly that Earth is already overflowing with trash, and now it's time to see who truly has the will to stay alive. At Gumho Station, a large crowd gathers as Cheon Inho announces that the situation has worsened and that more scouts are needed from the marginalized group, declaring that anyone who refuses to participate will no longer receive food, sending murmurs of anger and fear through the station as Dakja immediately recognizes it as an added food penalty designed to tighten control. Before the tension can settle, a blue system window appears, announcing the cost of survival clause: 100 coins deducted every midnight, with death as the penalty for failure. And Dakja realizes this mirrors ways of survival. Except this punishment never existed in the original story, making him suspect that his contract with Baihyang has already begun to distort the future. As Sangha anxiously asks if they should join the reconnaissance team to secure food, Dakja flatly refuses, warning that going above ground is certain death, and when she points out they'll starve otherwise, he calmly explains that if the world has changed, then so must what they eat, declaring they'll hunt monsters instead, leaving Hyeon Seong stunned at the idea of fighting creatures roaming the subway tracks. As they prepare to leave, Dakja notices Cheon Inho watching them with visible relief rather than resistance, and system notifications confirm his understanding of the man has deepened, making it clear that Inho is glad to see a potential threat disappear. With that, Dakja leads his group, Sangha, Hyeon Seong, Young Hee-won, and Gilleong Lee, into the dark subway tunnels, where Gilleong reveals his insect collector attribute and sends cockroaches ahead to scout, calmly reporting that the path is clear for the next 100 steps, just as a sharp chime rings out and a new sub-scenario arrives. At the entrance to the subway tunnels, Hyeon Seong Lee anxiously questions whether it was really okay to let Dakja Kim go ahead with only Gilleong, but Dakja calmly reassures him that Gilleong's ability will be crucial for tracking their targets, asking Hyeon Seong instead to stay behind and look after Young Hee-won, whose condition isn't good despite her stubborn protests. Deep inside the edge of darkness, where the tunnel swallows all light and the floor and ceiling blur together, Dakja reflects that this is the territory of ground rats, a place he could only navigate thanks to Gilleong's diverse communication without wasting precious coins. Suddenly, Gilleong stops and confronts him, accusing Dakja of deliberately allowing Sangha and Myongo Han to be taken earlier, revealing that he had been watching Dakja's expression the entire time, forcing Dakja to admit that lying would be pointless. Dakja explains that ground rats hoard rare objects and keep captured prey near their treasure, and that the maze-like burrows can only be traced by following their paths, only for Gilleong to press further, accusing him of prioritizing items over people and calling out his half-truths. Dakja admits he expected Han Myongo to be taken, but didn't anticipate Sangha being dragged in as well, asking quietly if Gilleong is disappointed in him, only for the boy to grab his sleeve and say no, insisting that Dakja couldn't be cruel because he saved him back in the subway, a simple trust that moves the watching constellations and earns Dakja more coins. Dakja realizes that despite Gilleong's maturity, he's still just a child in a world where cruel adults would exploit that, and as they draw closer to the nest and the tension tightens, Gilleong asks what Dakja really is, a god or the main character, only for Dakja to answer that he's not the protagonist, but someone who's always envied one, even though he knows things about this world. Gilleong then wonders aloud if they'll get a wish at the end of all this, like in stories, as Dakja reflects that people adapt to this world in different ways. some breaking, some clinging to blind hope. And as they hide behind rubble watching the Rat King's treasure hoard, a dark sentinel appears, the sub-scenario updates, and a single command echoes clearly in the darkness. Kill the sentinel. The of the dark finally reveals itself, and Giliong freezes in fear, but Dakja tells him to stay back, realizing all the insects connected to him have already died and that the backlash must have caused serious mental damage. Suddenly, Sangha speaks up, repeating a single word the monster said, "Mother," and Dakja is stunned when she explains she can understand it thanks to her interpretation skill, only to learn the creature isn't speaking metaphorically at all. Before anyone can react, the warden thrusts a stem into Myongo Han's mouth, forcing its offspring into his body, and Dakja instantly understands the horrifying meaning. He cuts the stem just in time, making the monster shriek, but when it retaliates, even Dakja's barrier is shattered with ease, leaving him with the grim realization that this enemy was never meant to be killed head-on. Buying time, Dakja calls a Dakibi and pressures it under the gaze of furious constellations, forcing it to deliver an item from the auction house. Broken Faith, a damaged weapon exempt from commission under his contract. Though the Dakibi mocks him for wielding a broken blade, Dakja activates the skill he bought after killing the serpent, White Star Weapon Aura, causing the weapon to react and transform as Blade of Faith ignites with power. When the warden attacks again, Dakja dodges and strikes, severing one of its stems, knowing this blade is especially effective against demonic species. He lacks sword skills, his mana drains fast, and raw power alone won't make him a warrior. But Dakja isn't a swordsman. He's a reader, and for the first time, that's enough to give him a chance. Dakja activates Bookmark and rushes the Warden of the Dark, reminding himself that a reader must fight like a reader, not a warrior. With only 1 minute of activation time and partial skill access, he borrows weapon proficiency just long enough to reach the monster and begins slicing through its stems, timing his attacks by reading its repeated patterns and striking in the brief pauses between its assaults. As the warden screams in demonic language, Sangha translates its shock, asking how Dakja knew where it would strike, and Dakja calmly answers that he's simply read a lot because the road ahead is still long. Against all expectations, the warden falls, stunning the watching constellations as disbelief ripples through the star stream, with the prisoner of the golden headband erupting in excitement and showering Dakja with coins. As Bookmark deactivates and Broken Faith finally shatters from exhaustion, Dakja explains that it wasn't a true ether blade, only a temporary construct fueled by White Star Weapon Aura, earning grudging admiration even from the Dakibi. Though offered massive rewards to finish the warden himself, Dakja refuses, knowing that killing a demonic species would draw the hatred of its demon king, and instead lets Myongo Han deliver the final blow, unknowingly inheriting a curse far worse than coins. While the constellations marvel at Dakja's cruelty disguised as mercy, he calmly opens the treasure chests, cooks monster meat over a rare mana brazier, and shares the meal, reminding himself that reading about survival and tasting it are two very different things. When a strange black item box appears, Dakja quietly assembles a gamble no one else understands, feeding it Broken Faith and the Warden's Core to trigger a hidden mechanic, producing Unbreakable Faith, a legendary constellation artifact once wielded by an ancient hero. As the group prepares to move on, Dakja senses something is wrong. Every insect nearby has vanished. Giliong begins to bleed from the nose, and a massive surge of unfamiliar energy erupts nearby, signaling that the true danger has only just begun. The ground suddenly trembles as massive vibrations from above signal the movement of high-tier monsters, and Dakja snaps Giliong out of his trance, realizing in shock that he was channeling a monarch-class insect, something far beyond what he should ever touch. He orders him to cut the connection immediately, forbidding him from using that skill again, knowing they'd be wiped out instantly if they stepped into the black tide now, so they choose to wait. As they regroup, Sangha offers to guide them back using a thread-based skill she tested earlier, but hesitates to reveal her personal attributes, prompting Dakja to warn her never to disclose them, suspecting her constellation is actively training her under strict secrecy. When Dakja tries to read her profile, the system responds with an unfamiliar message. Her information is still being collected, confirming she's anything but ordinary. Soon, the channel reopens and Bai-hyung returns, casually admitting he was reprimanded for shutting down the broadcast too long, boasting that the management's warnings don't scare him, before privately acknowledging Dakja's growing notoriety. Back at the station, desperation erupts as the survival fee countdown begins. 100 coins by midnight or death, and survivors beg, threaten, and humiliate themselves for spare coins. When Cheon In-ho exposes Dakja as the wealthiest person in the station, the crowd turns on him, blaming him for selling food, demanding refunds, and surrounding him in fury. Faced with the choice of losing thousands of coins or becoming the villain, Dakja coldly refuses to play along, questioning why he should save people who won't take responsibility for their own survival. When violence finally breaks out, Dakja moves first, severing an attacker's arm in a single slash and calmly asking the stunned crowd if they truly believe this situation is his fault, as the station falls silent and the constellations watch, waiting for his next move. Dakja checks the attacker's character summary and learns his name is Myongo Han, noting that his stats are far too high for an ordinary thug, then calmly tells the crowd the truth, that none of this is his fault, and that they're lashing out at him because they're scared of the gangsters who hold more coins and higher stats. As panic spreads, Dakja forces them to think, pointing out how dozens of ordinary survivors vanished while not a single member of the Kyeondu gang died to monsters, and how those men always returned stronger, richer, and untouched. When Dakja reminds them that Cheon In-ho once promised coins for killing, the implication hits hard. In-ho knew because he'd already done it, and the crowd finally turns on him as the Dakibi announces only 7 minutes remain. Dakja tells them that if they have any pride left, they should take back what was stolen with their own hands, and the station erupts as survivors attack the gang in a frenzy of rage and desperation. Young Hee-won steps forward, her suppressed rage finally breaking free as her attribute blossoms into Judge of Evil. And with the constellation's approval, she activates Time of Judgment, slaughtering the gang one by one in brutal silence. Cheon In-ho barely has time to smile before Hee-won strikes him down, ending the Kyeondu gang completely as the star stream explodes with ecstasy. When it's over, Hee-won collapses in thought, bloodied but resolute, and Dakja offers her his hand, telling her this is only the beginning, just as the system announces the survival fee will now be collected nightly and confirms they have officially entered the area of the second main scenario. By morning, most of the survivors have fled Jungo Station, leaving only a handful behind, and though Hee-won offers to bring them along, they choose to go their own way, trusting the few coins they still have. With Judge of Evil now firmly on their side, and Myongo Han gone without a trace, Dakja knows it's time to move on, and before they leave, Hee-won punches him lightly, hands over 500 coins as a share, and tells him she couldn't keep everything for herself. Coin rewards pour in from the star stream, and Dakja invests heavily in stamina, strength, agility, and mana, feeling his body surge with power as he prepares for the next stage, knowing stronger stats means stronger earnings and a bigger audience. The second main scenario activates, ordering them to pass through the tunnel and reach the central shelter zone at Chungmu Station. But the underground is infested with monsters, forcing them to fight non-stop until exhaustion sets in, and they stop briefly at Dongguk University Station to rest. While the others take a break, Dakja slips outside into the poisonous fog, guided by memory, and reaches the statue of the great monk Samyeong, where he first prays, then suddenly shatters the idol with his sword, stunning the watching constellations. Ignoring the outrage, Dakja claims the relics sealed within, powerful items tied to the monk's will, and returns to the group, presenting Hee-won with the robe of the great monk and Sangha with prayer beads infused with mana recovery, framing it as a blessing sent to protect Korea once again. Dakja's words move even the furious constellation behind the statue, turning anger into approval and rewards. As they resume their journey toward Chungmu Station, Dakja warns everyone to stay alert. There's less than half a mile left, and just as the station should come into view, a new sub-scenario arrives, and Dakja orders everyone to stand back. The system announces that the encounter for main scenario 2 has been completed and rewards are being calculated, but the relief vanishes instantly when red fire guns are aimed straight at Gillian. Dakja tells Senga to take care of Hee-won and steps forward, only to be stopped by a man demanding a toll. 500 coins just to stand on this land, making Dakja realize this entire area is someone's private green zone. Ji reveals the truth. The chaos here exists because Jung Hyukyu allowed it, and the ruler of this place is one of the 10 evils, the armament lord of Chungmu, Pildogong. Dakja confirms it by checking profiles. These armed men are nothing but the Landlord Coalition, former property owners now serving Pildo. Refusing to pay a middleman, Dakja calls Pildo out directly, drawing his attention and learning just how dangerous he is, a future calamity with overwhelming mana and power. When Pildo blocks them from staying unless they pay an impossible daily fee, Dakja counters with information instead, casually dropping Jung Hyukyu's name, igniting Pildo's anger and curiosity. Tension explodes when the guns fire, Hyeon-seong barely blocking the blast, as Dakja realizes fighting now would only get someone killed. Just as things spiral out of control, Jung Hyukyu himself appears, and Ji immediately points Dakja out as the man claiming to be his companion. Dakja reads Jung Hyuk's mind, greets him like an old friend, and calmly puts him on the spot, knowing Jung Hyuk may slaughter enemies without mercy. But he always keeps his promises. As the constellations hold their breath to see whether Jung Hyuk will honor his word, Dakja casually asks one last thing, testing fate itself, while Jung Hyuk stares back in silence. Jung Hyuk finally speaks, remarking that Dakja is lucky to have such capable companions, though he never once acknowledges him as an equal, answering instead by silently pointing his blade at Pildogong and forcing the armament lord to back down, for now. Dakja realizes Jung Hyuk doesn't care whether he lives or dies, and when he tries to read Jung Hyuk's full profile, he finds only a summary, making him suspect that Jung Hyuk has grown even more dangerous than he was in the novel's third round. Their exchange turns sharp and tense, with Jung Hyuk openly wondering if killing Dakja would be easier, while Dakja casually provokes him, knowing full well how close he is to death. When Hee-won regains consciousness, Jung Hyuk notes that Dakja has gathered new companions and coldly judges them as weak, confirming that he left Pildogong alive for his own future plans, not out of mercy. Dakja presses him, warning that the people of Chungmu will die if nothing is done, but Jung Hyuk dismisses it as none of his concern and leaves, already scheming for the next scenario. As the countdown to the third scenario begins, Dakja realizes he can't let Jung Hyuk dictate everything, nor can he confront Pildogong head-on while his militarized zone is active. He explains to Hee-won that her time of judgment can activate because evil itself is judged by the constellation standards, not human ones, and concludes that the only way to defeat Pildogong is to lure him out of his fortified territory. With 1 hour remaining, Dakja decides to secure a room first and plan properly, just as a Dakibi appears to announce the start of day 3 and the rules of the next scenario unfold before them. The third scenario begins with a simple rule: secure a green zone and survive 7 nights. But panic spreads as people start killing each other to claim territory before midnight. Dakja calms Senga, saying they don't need to fight like that, only to realize there are no empty rooms left in Chungmu Station, leaving them with a brutal choice. As time ticks down, he pretends to search while secretly confirming something even the Dakibi and constellations can't see. His phone shows a story only he can read. When his team returns empty-handed, Dakja lays out 2 options. The easy one, killing 5 weak survivors and stealing their room, or a far harder path that risks their lives but spares innocent blood. Though some admit they've killed before, none want to become monsters, and they choose the second option. With 5 minutes left, Dakja gives strict orders. They must split into teams and do exactly as he says, because if they fight the monsters head-on, they'll all die. As the ground begins to shake and the monsters spawn below, Dakja points forward and gives the final command: run straight toward the incoming horde. Countdown hits 0 and monsters flood the tunnels of Chungmu Station. Dakja gives a command that sounds like suicide: run straight at them. While panic erupts, He shouts for everyone to scan the left wall at the last second, revealing the truth that most people never realize. A green zone doesn't have to be a room. Just before collision, the wall glows and the hidden refuge of the brave activates, letting the monsters rush past them without touching a single soul. Catching their breath, Dakja knows they survived only because they dared to look where no one else would. But then he feels it, the pressure of a regressor. Yu Jung-hyuk stands nearby in his own hidden zone, already ahead of the story, casually asking Dakja to hand over Gil-young as if he were a spare tool. Dakja refuses without hesitation, knowing Jung-hyuk wants the boy's potential, not his safety. With monsters closing in and no room for compromise, Dakja opens his interface and makes his choice. To survive this night, he doesn't need control, he needs chaos. He activates his first bookmark, Kim Namwon, and steels himself as borrowed madness floods in, silently warning everyone to brace themselves, because the real fight is only just beginning. Dakja wakes up disoriented, standing beside a corpse, as the system warns him that the fourth wall has temporarily weakened due to excessive immersion. A flood of memories crashes into him, memories he refuses to accept, forcing him to clutch his head and resist, knowing some things should never be remembered. He realizes this is the backlash from the Spectre Spirit Stone he consumed earlier, an item that turns its user into a ghost species to evade monsters, but the cost of violently amplifying buried trauma. Anyone else would have gone insane, and all he can do now is endure until the fourth wall recovers. Then a blonde foreign woman appears behind him, mistaking him for Jung-hyuk, and when Dakja checks her profile, he learns the truth. Anna Croft, the prophet, a being who can invade consciousness itself and see the future. She probes him relentlessly, seeing through his lies with S-rank detection, until the fourth wall finally restores itself and shuts her out completely. As her vision fails, Dakja tells her they'll meet again, just not yet. Moments later, he dispels the lingering effects and returns to his group, greeted with relief as they confirm the third scenario has ended. But Dakja shuts down any celebration. They only survived a single day. Morning has come. Exhaustion hangs heavy, and nearby, Jung-hyuk is already trying to recruit Gil-young again, promising power. Gil-young refuses, choosing Dakja instead. And as Dakja watches silently, too drained to interfere, he knows one thing for certain. This story is accelerating far faster than it ever should have. Dakja wakes to the cold floor of Chumuro Station with a stiff neck, realizing he somehow survived the night outside a green zone, using Hyun-sung's thigh as a pillow of all things. And in this world, that alone is an achievement. Coins roll in, the constellations watching more closely than ever, some with sympathy, others with unsettling curiosity. As he moves toward the ticket gates, members of the Landlord Alliance circle like vultures, delivering Pildu Gong's message with a grin. Entry comes at a price, and they want the women too. Dakja immediately understands the kind of man Pildu is, one of the 10 evils who turned a public station into private property, and quietly decides this lease won't last long. But before he can act, Jaihai appears behind him without warning, using Ghost Walk to tell him bluntly not to make a deal with trash like them. And Dakja notes how sharp and dangerous she's become under Jung-hyuk's training. Down in the basement, Hee-won cleans her blade and asks why they didn't just slaughter the landlords already. But Dakja tells her killing them isn't enough, they need the station itself. Finally, he walks straight into the restricted zone, ignoring the guards' threats, and tells them to inform Pildu he's not here to pay rent. He's here to talk. Because Pildu thinks he owns this station, and Dakja is about to show him that in this story, he's nothing more than a character waiting to be rewritten. With the clock ticking, Dakja splits the group without hesitation, sending Hee-won, Sangha, and Gil-young to platform for while he moves on a landlord's zone, knowing they have to act before Pildu realizes what's happening. As he walks, Hyun-sung quietly admits his fear that this is the first time anyone has truly relied on him. But Dakja reassures him, telling him he's the core of the plan, the shield holding everything together. When Dakja steps into Gong Pildu's fortified territory, red warnings flare and the man himself sneers, already confident behind his walls and guns, unaware he's built nothing but a cage. Turrets burst from the walls and magic bullets tear through the air as Dokja dives for cover, feeling his stats suppressed by the privatized zone, fully aware that Pilda's greatest weapon isn't firepower, but his arrogance. Then Hyunsung steps forward, resolve hardening, metallic light wrapping around him as his attribute finally blossoms. At Dokja's signal, he unleashes his power, smashing through the battlefield in a single overwhelming surge. The moment where an ordinary soldier truly becomes a steel sword, turning the tide exactly as Dokja remembered, yet still leaving him breathless to witness it with his own eyes. Dokja stands amid the rubble of shattered green zones, watching dust settle as Senga, Hwon, and Gilliong finish tearing down the last hiding places, knowing those zones were never salvation, but a flaw designed to turn survivors against each other. As Baihyung screams about broken balance, Dokja ignores him, because the constellations are loving it, coins flooding in as the story veers violently off script. With the small zones gone, Gong Pildu finally realizes his monopoly is finished, raging at Dokja for dooming everyone, only to be told the truth. Survival now means fighting together, not hiding behind rented walls. When the bounty on Dokja's head expires, the last leash snaps, and the landlord is forced into a role he never wanted. As monsters surge from the tunnels, Pildu activates his militarized zone, massive turrets erupting from the ground and unleashing a storm of magic fire. Watching the front line blaze, Dokja knows the script has been rewritten. This is how the so-called 10 evils were meant to fight, not preying on the weak, but standing against the scenario itself, with every survivor finally facing the same enemy. As Chungmuro Station descends into chaos, Pildu Gong roars in desperation while monsters crash endlessly against his defenses, his skills leveling up mid-battle as his constellation bleeds resources to keep him alive. Watching from a distance, Dokja realizes Pildu can't hold out much longer, especially with Jung Heek having entered a dungeon nearly 11 hours ago, forcing Dokja to finally act. He upgrades his Dakibi shop membership to gold, burns through coins, and purchases a rare support contract, one that flips the power dynamic by turning a constellation into the one being sponsored. With the third main scenario revealed as an all-out emergency defense, and hours still remaining, Dokja approaches Pildu and speaks directly to his backer, the long-forgotten defense master, offering him a deal instead of extinction. Shock ripples through the star stream as the constellation agrees, signing a contract that hands Dokja authority over Pildu himself, instantly ending the landlord's freedom to act on his own, ordering Pildu back into the fight and warning him not to touch his companions. Dokja secures the battlefield at last, only to uncover something far more disturbing. A glimpse of the future tells him Jung Heek's 8th regression has already ended, something that should be impossible at this point. And with a grim scowl, Dokja turns away from the battlefield, deciding it's time to hunt down the so-called protagonist and knock some sense into him himself. Dokja and his party enter the Daeon Cinema, triggering a hidden dungeon already discovered by someone else, along with a new high-difficulty scenario that requires defeating the master of the cinema dungeon for a hefty reward. As Jaihai jokes about the eerie romance of a perfectly preserved movie theater, she quickly turns suspicious, demanding to know why Dokja is risking so much to save Jung Heek. And when pressed, Dokja admits the truth. He's doing it because Jung Heek is useful. Inside, Dokja immediately reads the structure of the dungeon, realizing the real battles are hidden inside movie posters acting as individual stages, and that Jung Heek is likely already climbing toward the 8th floor, planning to claim every reward alone. When the group approaches a monster movie poster, a massive prehistoric insect, a Titanoptera, bursts out of the screen, shocking Jaihai, until Gilliong calmly steps forward and begins communicating with it. Dropping the name of the famed entomologist Jean-Henri Fabre, Dokja watches as Gilliong effortlessly befriends the creature, confirming his suspicion that this stage can be cleared without combat. Jung Heek likely skipped it due to lacking the right ability, proving once again that in this dungeon, knowledge and the right companions matter more than brute force. A prehistoric jungle unfolds around them as a tier, 7 Tyrannosaurus Rex roars into view, its fear-inducing skill crashing down on the party, only to be completely blocked by Dakja's fourth wall. He calmly issues orders, shielding Giliong while sending Hee-won and Jai-hai to the flanks, and moments later, Giliong activates Dinosaur Encyclopedia, explaining the beast's narrow vision and side weaknesses. Jai-hai charges without hesitation, Hee-won strikes low, and Dakja points them toward the central research lab, reminding them they're inside a movie and every story needs a proper finale. The T-Rex falls, and inside the ruined lab, Dakja finds stat-boosting ampoules, strength, stamina, and mana, prompting Jai-hai to immediately accuse him of hoarding. As constellations begin arguing over fairness, Dakja cuts through the tension with a grin and proposes the most serious solution he knows: rock, paper, scissors. Dakja leads the group deeper into the cinema dungeon, explaining that Jung-heek has already cleared a few floors and that only intact posters can be entered, since each one tears after being cleared. By the 4th floor, they're thrown into a sinking ship movie, where Hui-won immediately gets seasick and ends up cast as the female lead, complete with a fancy dress, while the story's villain is captured. Jai-hai coldly insists they kill him to get a more decisive ending, arguing that this dungeon rewards action, not mercy, and despite Hee-won's hesitation, she stabs him without flinching. The cinema master approves. The door to the next floor opens, and each of them receives 500 coins for reaching the second ending. On the 5th floor, the real prize appears, a reward room filled with high-quality Grade A replica gear, which is the true reason Dakja came here in the first place. He hands a replica sword to Hui-won, secures a powerful shield for Hyun-sung, equips reinforced armor for himself, and watches Giliong struggle unsuccessfully to lift a replica Mjolnir, much to Jai-hai's annoyance. After gearing up, they move on to the 6th floor, only to find Jung-heek already gone, and upon clearing the thriller stage, Dakja acquires the skill Sharp Observation, giving him the ability to roughly gauge other characters' overall strength as the dungeon grows steadily more dangerous. As the sea-based movie stage rages around them, Dakja realizes the truth behind Jai-hai's sponsor and shouts her name, asking if she is truly a descendant of Admiral Lee Sun-sin, a revelation that once divided readers of 3 ways to survive in the apocalypse, and Jai-hai weakly confirms it while collapsing from seasickness and fear. Paralyzed as the enemy fleet closes in, she refuses to fight, trapped by the trauma of having survived in the past by killing her best friend, reliving her own sea of blood. Dakja grabs her and forces her to face him, telling her that atonement doesn't come from dying, but from surviving and earning it while still alive, and as his understanding of her deepens, Jai-hai breaks down and admits she doesn't want to die. In response to that will to live, an immense power erupts from her as spectral warships rise from the sea. Her new stigma, Ghost Fleet, activating under the gaze of the naval warfare god and turning the tide of battle in an instant. When the stage finally clears and the phantom ships fade away, Dakja quietly notes that making Jai-hai stronger ultimately strengthens Jung-heek as well, but there's no time to dwell on it. Jung-heek has already reached the 9th floor, the boss room, and they need to move now.